When she's not writing articles for British newspapers or doing radio for the BBC, she's in the kitchen. And her mix of humor and history make a great recipe for bringing ancient Catholic traditions to your home for generations to come. Tonight, we've got all the ingredients for a jolly good time, so please stay with us. Thank you, and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to EWTN Live, our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. And tonight, we're doing just that. Our guest tonight is a Catholic journalist and a regular blogger on EWTN.com, where she keeps us updated with news from the Catholic Church in the United Kingdom. She's set up shop in EWTN's kitchen this week, shooting the 4th installment of her series, Feasts and Seasons. So please welcome our guest and good friend, Mrs. Joanna Bogle. Good to have you.
Great to be here.
Welcome back to the United States.
It's lovely being here. I'm really enjoying it.
Sorry about our weather being a little bit on the cool side.
Well, we were snowed in London, you know, Heathrow closed and all that sort of thing. And then when it thawed and I flew to America, I found I was snowed in Alabama, which I wasn't expecting.
Neither were we.
No.
Neither were we.
Oh, it's great fun. I've had a very cozy time. I really enjoyed it. Lots of books. Hot coffee, it's all been very enjoyable.
Good.
So, yeah.
But now that there's been some thaw, you've been able to get back to work and do your series. What are you doing this time?
Well, the idea was that I would redo the series from Advent to Christmas and then Lent to Easter, but I decided to expand that a bit, which is probably going to annoy all your frightfully grand top people here, because I thought I'd stretch it back. To do a lot of programs about Advent is difficult. I thought I'd set it further back and start with September, harvest, the harvest traditions, Michaelmas, October, month of the Rosary.
We would say in America, Michaelmas, but
we say Michaelmas.
I know. Michaelmas would be, good English.
Well, and it gives its name, of course, to the university term and the legal term and so on. And then you have October. And then in November, we have our bonfire tradition, sort of complicated there, Guy Fawkes, and that's a tragic story of Catholic
we tried to blow up Parliament.
Yes, or didn't, depending on which version you know, and so on. And then Prayer for the Dead in November, and Remembrance Day, the War Dead, and then start on Advent. So there's lots of food to cook, Parkin gingerbread and blackberry and apple pie for Michaelmas, and you just name it.
Blackberry apple pie?
Blackberry and apple pie.
And apple pie.
Or apple charlotte, even better.
Okay, so that's for Michaelmas you have a specific dessert.
Well, what you do is you pick blackberries, and I went blackberry picking with a couple of local families, and then you come back. I mean, there's just too many blackberries, so you make blackberry pie, and you make blackberry jam, and you make bottled blackberries, and you tell the children to eat blackberries and cream, and yes, so I made all sorts of nice pies and things. I love it. It's my favourite season is autumn, and then of course as soon as you get into the end of autumn and you have Christmas. In a way, we've got a lot of recipes for that, but we all know them, don't we? We sort of know about Christmas. I'm trying to do some of the earlier autumn things, and then there's all the Lent and springtime stuff too. So,
okay.
Yeah. At the moment, even as we speak, I've got raisins soaking in tea for Barabrith. Well, I want to make Barabrith for St. David's Day. So,
now, is this named after King David of the Old Testament?
Oh, no, this is St. David, the patron of Wales.
Oh, okay.
St. David, the patron of Wales. You know, in a way, we're losing a lot of our traditions in Britain. We all live in centrally heated houses, and we shop in supermarkets, and we eat junk food. And, I mean, it's all great fun talking about the old traditions, but I really want to keep some things alive, because a lot of our traditions, not only of cooking, but just of doing things, just even family games and even jokes and songs, they're just disappearing, and I want to keep that alive. I don't want it to die. And in our family, we have a lot of fun at Christmas. And I'm not saying this is just a specifically Catholic thing, because like lots of other people, my family is partly Catholic and partly not. My husband's a convert. But we play charades, and we have old family jokes and traditional things we do. And this is the stuff of life itself. Yeah. And I just think it's really sad if what you end up doing is sitting around eating popcorn, watching the telly. I mean, it's nice to do that every now and then, but if that's life, it's not life.
Yeah,
I feel quite strongly about it, you know.
Yeah, especially since you had to get popcorn from us.
Yes, actually, I don't like popcorn, and the American stuff tastes of cardboard with salt on it, if you don't mind my saying so. So that's a particular example. We tend to have it with caramel popcorn, which I like. It's probably frightfully bad for one, but I prefer it. But I don't really like the American sort of popcorn, but we now have it at all our cinemas.
Is that right?
You can't watch a film and just be caught up in the drama of it. You have to sit there eating cardboard with salt on it. I think it's rather silly. And I went to see the other night the wonderful
Next
film.
time, instead of just eating the cardboard with salt, put some butter on it.
That would be better, wouldn't it?
A little smear on there is good.
I just find it funny if you're watching a really profound film. I mean, you don't want to eat, but everybody does.
No, I know. Actually, I don't eat popcorn when I watch the movies.
I think you feel the same. And I think we're losing something, and the average British family, I mean, actually, even experts are quite concerned about this. There was some rather ghastly government revelation that children don't know the skipping rhymes and nursery rhymes, and so they were trying to teach them in some official way. Well, that almost destroys it, doesn't it? You know, hello, I come from the government to teach you nursery rhymes. You couldn't invent it. It has to happen from the heart.
I know it.
We have to just do it. And I'm not convinced that running around EWTN making cakes for St. David's Day is the answer, but it's part of the answer, actually, because Catholics do keep things alive in our homes and schools, too. In our Catholic schools, we're doing quite a lot of good stuff without even realising it, just celebrating a Saint's Day. Just mentioning that it's a Saint's Day at morning assembly, just celebrating St. Patrick's Day, just having special collections for a charity in Lent, at least is marking the seasons. And we could do much more than that, and we should do more. And most schools do. But we need to pass on these things to one another. And I love it. It's great fun. And of course, it's awfully messy. I mean, I'm making a complete mess of your kitchen here, but there we are. That's all part of the fun as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you've got chaps here who help with the washing up, which is pretty good.
That's where the real fun is. You can make a mess and somebody else helps you clean it up.
That's what is fun, yes.
Yeah.
And shopping in America is all funny because the supermarkets are all full of ridiculously giant packages. And it is fun.
Do you have little boxes?
No, we have huge packets too, but here they're just jumbo packets. A lot of the food is now, all over the world the same. But you have a greater mix. You certainly have a greater mix here, the cultural mix. And I think there is a sense in which there's a sort of fear that we're losing our cookery skills even, actually. Certainly we are at home, You buy everything and just open the tin and eat it. But if you're confronted with butter and flour and sugar...
By the way, for the American audience, that's a tin can.
A can, yes.
Yeah, right.
The one, when we talk about the Pope's visit, the one thing that baffled Americans was the girl who had the big poster that said, "We love you, Papa, more than beans on toast." And no American understood what she meant. And
what is beans on toast?
Exactly. It's impossible to convey. It's baked beans in tomato sauce.
Right.
And these are very bland baked beans in a sweet, sticky, bright orange, slightly disgusting tomato sauce. And it's our national food, and we absolutely love it. And you empty the tin into a saucepan and warm it up, and then you put it on hot buttered toast. And it's what Americans would call comfort food. I like it with a fried egg on top. And if you say to the Holy Father, "Papa, we love you more than beans on toast," I can't tell you, it's the biggest compliment you could possibly pay him. And this struck a deep chord in everybody. And she'd also got some Wellington boots, and she'd painted one white and one yellow, and she'd got a placard that said, "Give it some welly for the Pope in the park." And that's untranslatable as well, but it means give your heart and your enthusiasm to the Holy Father when he comes to Hyde Park. You can't really translate it. Give it some welly means it's untranslatable. And wellies are boots.
Right.
Right. So all of these things were very British. And I think, to be honest, even other continental people would understand them more easily than Americans, because there's this language divide. It's very funny.
I know it. It is.
And
if we say to give somebody the boot...
I know, that would be the wrong thing. We would use that expression too, but wellies are different, you see. Wellies are different. And
are they a high boot?
No, they're just rubber boots that you wear when it rains.
Oh, I see.
And but to give an example, if you want to have a fundraising thing, you might have a Wang the Welly competition, which means how far can you throw a Wellington boot. It's very difficult to explain why the British find that fun. It's sort of...
You're right.
Yes. But it is fun. And beans on toast, really you eat them, I don't know, when it's been an uncomfortable sort of day and things haven't gone well, and you'd eat you would have beans on toast in the kitchen sort of thing, perhaps at one end of the table while somebody's making you a nice brew of tea at the other, and everyone is just... And it would be a comforting, solid, beans on toast way to finish the day. And the Holy Father gave us joy in our hearts that were a bit like that, I think.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the Pope's visit.
Right. Well, since you ask, where do I start? Where do I stop? It was fantastic. It really was fantastic. Almost literally in the sense that it had a quality of charm and joy about it. First, because we didn't think it was going to be good. Because,
why not?
Well, if you remember, all this year we had this barrage of attack on the church because of the appalling sex abuse scandals. And the ghastly thing about that was that it was rooted in the reality of evil behavior. And this broke the Holy Father's heart, and it broke all our hearts. And we were the next major country he was going to visit after this great scandal had been dominating the headlines. So our atheists were having a field day. We had a campaigning atheist group in Britain led by Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. Well, they thought all their holidays had come at once. In addition to that, you have a very militant homosexual campaigning group called Outrage, and they were thrilled about all of this. And then you have the natural anti-Catholic prejudices of the, how does one put it, the soi-disant sort of, well-thinking people, the Guardian writers, Polly Toynbee and all
Guardian
these people.
Is a newspaper.
It's the left-of-centre newspaper. And this meshes very, very well with the sort of nomenclatura of the left-of-centre establishment. And you probably don't recall, but there was a shocking, truly shocking, memo produced by a Foreign Office official mocking the Pope, saying that he should be invited to open an abortion clinic. I mean, it was all unspeakable filth. All of that went on through the summer. And meanwhile, Catholics were thrilled and excited about the Holy Father coming, but nobody was listening to us. And we also had practical difficulties in the sense that, everything had to be organised, and this at a time when there are terrorist possibilities. And so everyone was worried. Ordinary Catholics weren't, but the organisers wanted to make sure everybody who came had a valid ticket and showed their passport or something. So it was all horrible. And then when the Holy Father arrived, it was so marvellous. The moment he walked down the steps of the aeroplane in Edinburgh, not in London, he had to go to Scotland because it's summer, so the Queen was in Scotland. And it was all going to start in Scotland, which was wonderful. It was the best possible thing. And as soon as he walked down the steps, everything changed, because what we saw, what the world saw, what his enemies saw, what all who loved him saw, was this sweet, good man coming tripping down the steps of the aeroplane as if he was 20 years younger than he is, with a bright smile. It was marvellous, and he walked into everybody's hearts. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And everything happened that was beautiful and right. He has got an extraordinary charm to him. And he broke through all the barriers. First, he kept stopping the Pope-mobile to caress and kiss babies and kiss the tops of their heads. And he's sweet about this. And it got to the point where you could feel everyone thinking, if he blesses my baby, that the baby will grow up not to do drugs or something. They sort of felt that it would be a blessing. And it is indeed a blessing.
Yes, it is.
It's a real blessing. And you could see this, that he was giving them what he'd got, which is the blessing of God. That's what he is. He's a priest of God. And of course we knew the Queen would get it right, because she always does. But she went out of her way. She sent the Duke of Edinburgh to meet him at the airport, which you'd never normally get. And then there was this wonderful, very touching scene where they greeted one another, these two elderly people, both of whom have held fast to what is good against, all the
They're
odds.
about the same age, aren't they?
They are within a few months of the same age. And it's extraordinary, really, because the Queen is obviously a very devout woman, and it's clear, and she makes this quietly clear by her own attendance at church and by what she says about Jesus Christ every year in her Christmas message to us and so on. And, as everybody knows, her family have not always lived a good Christian way, but she has. She's kept faithful. She and Prince Philip have really lived their lives in service to the nation. And here was this woman, not young, greeting this man, not young. And they've got this in common. Both of them, for quite different reasons, at a young age, were committed to a lifetime of service. He made the decision as a boy to be a priest, to enter a junior seminary, and at about the same age, she realised she was the heir to the throne. And that's a commitment, and that's a serious commitment under God. And she has kept her promises and been faithful to what God called her to do.
That's very nice.
Which is nice.
We don't have all of that sense of the Queen, and her role, here in this country. And I think it's very nice for you to give that perspective of her, because she's much admired here. but, she's something of a mystery. We just think, well, the Queen of England is quite distant.
There's something real. And to me, there was something rather sort of spiritual in this meeting with the Pope. And she is deeply loved at home. And, we're a very unhappy country. I mean, we have a soaring crime rate. The biggest health problem is obesity. We have a massive drunken alcoholic problem among our young. 50% of births are out of wedlock. We've got so much that is just cracking apart. And the fastest growing religion, humanly speaking, is Islam. Right. Many of our major cities are massively Islamic and going to be more so within the next 2 decades. So we needed the successor of St. Peter to come. He needed to confirm the brethren, And he did. And what was so marvellous was that he began in Scotland, where there is actually still quite a strong sense of culture. There is something about being Scottish. There's the tartan and the recipes and the songs, and it was real. And after greeting the Queen, after greeting the Holy Father, that was all very beautiful, and children came to give him flowers and all of this. And then Her Majesty saw him on his way, and he got in the Pope-mobile, and he had what we can only describe as a triumphant ride through the streets of Edinburgh. And the protesters weren't there. It was really funny. At one point, the cameras panned to where the protesters were, and they weren't. They just hadn't come. In London, there was a protest demonstration against him, but by then, the whole visit, the papal visit, had gathered momentum. Everything was joyful. And there were a number of beautiful things that came together. I mean, just extraordinary, really. One woman who captured everybody's hearts was Sue Boyle, who won the singing.
Oh, yes.
Well, she's Catholic. There's a wonderful...
she sang in her church choir.
Yes, that's right. And she has this golden voice. And she's Catholic. She walked into everybody's hearts. And, of course, there she was singing for the Pope. There are 3 priests who've got a singing group called The Priests.
Right.
I mean, of course, they're Catholic, so they were singing. It was as if almost anybody who'd walked into our hearts in the previous couple of years turned out to be Catholic. A lovely family called the Misen family, who had the most terrible tragedy. Their boy was killed in a random anger attack. He was killed by a piece of flying glass as somebody just randomly attacked him. And they're a lovely, lovely Catholic family. And his parents, instead of stomping the country saying lock people up and throw away the key, have been talking to everyone about love and forgiveness. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah,
and only Catholics can do this. So somehow there were so many people in public life. And so when the Pope's visit came, these would be the people who would, be brought together to sing, to speak at a rally. I went to the big rally in Hyde Park, which was really for young people, but other people there too. There were 80,000 people on their knees in complete silence with the Holy Father in front of the Blessed Sacrament. It was an indescribably beautiful experience. And all this was only yards away from where our Catholic martyrs were hung, drawn and quartered.
Exactly. I was just going to say, that's not too far away from where the English martyrs were killed.
Yes, Tyburn Tree. And we were in that corner of the park, and the whole of that part of the park was given over to the Holy Father. And again, in Pope-mobile, he went through the streets of London to, I may say, cheering crowds and crowds and crowds and crowds of people holding up their children to be blessed. And it was just joy. And then we could hear these cheers, and then also we then saw him as the big screen was up, and we saw him arrive in the park, and then we all erupted in cheers. And we'd been singing and praying, and there'd been people giving talks and so on along the lines I said. And earlier in the afternoon, as everyone gathered and had picnics, there was Polish dancing and Irish dancing, and some sweet dance children did an entertainment. It was just beautifully done and very happy. And anyone watching it would think, if this is the Catholics, this is fine. I'd like to be part of this, And it was Britain at its best, really. And then he came and spoke most beautifully to us, and called especially to young people. And it was a bit like a mini World Youth Day, actually. And then he said, and now we'll pray. And we all, turned to the Lord. And the BBC and every other TV network showed the Holy Father, and then they just focused on the monstrance. And there was complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the wet grass, and we all knelt and prayed. I mean, it was just... These are unforgettable moments, very difficult to put into words, really, even for a chatterbox like me. And then the next day there was the fabulous beatification mass, when he beatified John Henry Newman. And various of us travelled overnight, and thousands of people travelled from all over Britain, and there we all were on these... There's a natural amphitheatre, Cofton Park, outside of Birmingham, and there was this beautiful mass, and a 3,000-strong choir, boys and girls from different schools connected with John Henry Newman and so on, and it was fabulous. And he, again, preached extremely well. He was a very knowledgeable, wise man, and there was such a happy spirit. I felt I felt this is the Britain I know and could feel happy with. And it was all different backgrounds and races, and you could see there's a future here. And there are problems facing the church in Europe. There certainly are, and we're part of that. But we have a future and a hope. We certainly have a future and a hope.
And see, that's one of the things. You quoted the line from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 22, where Jesus told Peter to, strengthen the faith of your brethren. And that's exactly what he was doing there. And that was something that John Paul saw as a key to his ministry. And so also does Pope Benedict.
Yes, and it's very interesting because Providence, the good Lord has arranged, the concept of international television, easy jet travel, and gathering people in large crowds is easier, with microphones and so on. So it's absolutely right that this should be used. And for years also when I was much younger, I'd hear the grown-ups saying, oh, everything's terrible in the church, numbers are going down. And it isn't so. We've survived some difficult years. After a great council of the church, it was likely there would be some difficult years. And I would say that some good things, very good things are happening. And we can't always see them. Something like a papal visit makes you look around and think, but here we are. Vast numbers of fine people, including lots and lots of fine young people.
One of those things that's going on that I'd like to talk about is the Anglican Ordinariate. Tell us a little bit about what that is, first of all.
Right. The Holy Father made a wonderful offer to the Anglican Church. He said, if you want to come into the great Church of God, we could form an Anglican Ordinariate, a clumsy word, but there was no other word for it, in which you could bring with you your own Anglican traditions, your liturgical traditions, which are quite beautiful, not only the hymns, but all sorts of traditions. 400 years is a long time. There's some beautiful things there. You could have your married clergy, who would have to become Catholic priests, but that your clergymen could be ordained as Catholic priests, just within the ordinariate, and you would have your own presiding bishop in this ordinariate. The equivalent might be a little bit like the military bishop who has a diocese which is not geographical.
Right.
Another parallel might be, nothing is exact, a bit like Opus Dei, which is a movement with its own priests, but within the wider
its own
church.
bishop.
Yes, or another little parallel, and again, none of these are exact, would be a bit like the Eastern Rite churches within Western countries, which you have, I think, here in America, and we certainly do in England too.
And if somebody joined the Anglican Ordinariate, they would be able to receive communion in the rest of the church.
Oh, yes.
And vice versa.
Yes, it would be absolutely Catholic. Now, there are a number of reasons for this happening. First is that this is really going back 20 years ago when the Anglican Church invented priestesses and so on, and a number of Anglicans thought this is hopeless, this is ridiculous, and wanted to become Catholic. Many of them then would have liked to have come with their congregations. There was a great feeling, we've come to the end of the road in the Anglican Church, we've seen now the bigger picture. And it didn't really happen. They came over as individuals. But the idea that something could be formed lingered. And finally it's taken shape in this Anglican Ordinariate. I think it's going to, I was going to say work. That makes it sound as if it's something, we've invented. I think it's an idea whose time has come, and I think the Pope in his wisdom has been mulling this one over quietly for many, many years, because as Cardinal Ratzinger, he was absolutely the person discussing things with Anglicans over a long period of time. And it could be a great blessing to the Anglican Church. It would be, if you like, a bridge between the Catholic and the Anglican Church. But these people would be absolutely Roman Catholics.
Okay.
Whether it is going to happen, I'm involved with some of these people. They have a magazine called Portal, which you can read on the internet, and I write for it. And I was just having a long conversation the other day with a young girl who's the wife of one of these Anglican clergymen. They have 2 small children, and these people are taking a plunge into the unknown, really, financially and so on. And they'll probably have more children, and where will they be educated? How will they do it? We must all work and help, and I think it will work. And I do pray, really do pray, that the Anglican Church doesn't see this as a threat or anything, but just as something that is going to happen, and it will be beautiful. It will be beautiful.
As a matter of fact, we have a number of Anglican usage parishes here in this country, and I've concelebrated Mass at them, in the past. And Pope John Paul II and one of the priests from America worked out the liturgy, going through the Book of Common Prayer and, getting that which is very Catholic. in the Book of Common Prayer and getting that together so that there would be a normal liturgy. And it's really quite well done and quite dignified liturgy. So it's something that is a very positive experience for those who already are doing it.
And that's the model, you see. Yeah. I think it's going to happen. And I think the problem is people like me need to think about it and pray about it and help. There's a tendency for us to think, oh, well, that's nice. But no, we are seeing something great here. This is the final chapter in a long chapter that began with Henry VIII's break with the church, and he, of course, remained a Catholic. He was, would have gone to a Latin Mass every day. His problem was loyalty to the church. He was a sort of right-wing Catholic in that sense. And then but he broke with the church. He wanted it all on his terms. Then Elizabeth I creates the Anglican Church. It's very oppressive of the Catholics. But what you have now is something really quite different. 400 years is a long time. By the 19th century, it was no longer the Church of Elizabeth I. People had been born into that tradition, and for many people, it was their path to God. It was a way of discovering about Jesus Christ and the New Testament and, the Ten Commandments and the law of God, and it helped some people on that path. So the next step, God doesn't sort of let us stand still. There is the next step, and someday the great breach will be healed, and the evil that was achieved by Henry VIII, who did it for selfish purposes, chopping off the heads of his wives and so on, will have been subsumed, and there will be something that is healed over. But it will take prayer, and I think these Anglicans who are now taking this plunge into the ordinariate are really rather brave, because they won't starve, but there is a difficulty. They are taking a step into the unknown, and it behoves us to pray and see how we can help, and I hope our bishops will show us as ordinary Catholics how we can help, and whatever it is we need to do to make sure that all is well, and it could be beautiful. It could be beautiful. And the Pope's visit, again, came at the right time, helped everybody to see, oh, here is the successor of St. Peter. And for a lot of Anglicans, they'd say, yeah, he's the chief. Yeah, I understand that. And they would never have said that further back in history. So there has already been a degree of healing. John Paul II, the great John Paul, achieved a lot when he came to Britain. And Benedict is the brains behind this, the peacemaker and the consolidator of this.
Right.
We've been living in very exciting times, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is very exciting times. And I think, as you keep emphasizing, that there's this reconciliation that's going on.
Yes, there is.
That's a very positive experience. And, I think to see this. And one of the things I'm hoping for is that there would be a continuous back and forth, because it's not just that the Anglican usage is going to be getting something from the rest of the Roman Catholics, but they'll also be contributing something to the Catholic Church. And, there's a hymnology, for instance, that is very dignified. And we've gone through a spate of some modern hymns that have not been all that
silly.
Some of them have been silly, and some of them not very profound.
Yes.
And there's a beauty of English hymnology that's just wonderful, and much of it will be able to contribute, just that. Among many other things.
Among many other things, but that's right. And one might look at things, for example, the tradition of Harvest Festival, which we think of as very Anglican, but it's a beautiful idea to give thanks to God for the harvest. That will be another one. Some of their language.
We already have that.
Yeah, well,
with Thanksgiving.
Yes, we don't really have it, partly because the Catholic Church in more modern times in Britain has been associated with a very urban culture, Irish immigration and so on. And that's a fine heritage, but, we've lost that tradition of the rural life. That would be something else. And with it, some other linked traditions, including the idea of the whole local community, the Anglican Church being the local church. That's important too. And there are very nice things that I've seen Anglican parishes do that we could very easily quietly make our own, because they are really Catholic in origin. And I could see all of that, and a dignity in the liturgy, and even some of the way, the beautiful flower arrangements and so on. I could see them bringing quite a lot, and all the more so because it would be done in a sort of low-key way,
Right.
And there's a gentleness there that I think will work. And then the experience of having to make some sacrifices to bring this, well, that's rather fine.
That's going to be a great source of spiritual strength for them too.
I think
because there's nothing like sacrifice and fasting and praying to help somebody to really bring a positive influence.
I think so.
I have to take a break. But we'll be back in a couple of minutes because we want to get your questions and your comments. So please call in, and we'll be back with you in about 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome back. We'd like to welcome you to be part of our studio audience if you get a chance. The roads are thawing out. As we were talking before, we had a snowstorm, but now the roads are clear. You can come down. Some of you folks in the Northeast will have a little trouble right now, but as soon as your roads thaw out, come on down and visit. We'd love to have you here. And our pilgrimage department can be reached at 205-271-2966. That's 205-271-2966. Or you can go to our website, www.ewtn.com. And they'll give you all kinds of information about scheduling of programs, making sure you get tickets to come to the shows. Sometimes they're full, but most of the times there's plenty of room for you, plenty of room. And they'll give you information about where you can stay and all the rest. So please come on down and visit us. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes, I jolly well am. Anybody wants to phone in?
Well, let's have a caller. Marianne is on the line. Hello, Marianne.
Hi, Father Mitch. Happy New Year from a very snowy New York City. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well understanding of the snow in New York. I was caught in the Christmas snowstorm.
Oh, we were here too, but it's pretty for a day or two, and then it gets a little old after a while.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
My question is for Joanna. I love Feasts and Seasons. I think it's wonderful. I just love your show, and I was just curious what inspired you to incorporate, the wonderful art of cooking into and incorporate that with Catholic feasts and theology and all that good stuff.
Well,
thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. I must admit, my family treat all this with a bit of a pinch of salt because I'm not the world's best cook. And there's a certain amount of joking that some people cook, and then Auntie Joanna goes to America and tells people the importance of staying at home and cooking. There's a certain sort of... I'm not a great cook, and sadly, Jamie and I have no children. It's just the two of us. So to be perfectly honest, a lot of the time, he gets an omelette or something like that. It's not the interest in cooking as such. It really is the interest of the traditions and the culture. And food and cooking, and to a lesser extent things we make in the home, Christmas decorations and chocolate eggs at Easter and all that sort of stuff, are the ways we express our faith. And it really began for me with an interest in local history, where I grew up in London, all the London history, festivals and customs and the origins of nursery rhymes and pub signs. And then there was a feeling, well, you don't just write about these things, you do them. And at home, we always did everything in a very traditional way. My parents taught us all the old songs, and we cooked and everything at home, and so it was natural from there. But I remember once on a rather more antagonistic radio program, not EWTN, but one where I was being very much challenged, and somebody said, "Oh, well, I'm sure you live in a beautiful old farmhouse with a flagstone kitchen." I said, "No, I don't. I grew up in the suburbs." And I think you want to have customs and traditions in modern life, in the suburbs of London, and not just in a beautiful old farmhouse, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's a bit of an evangelical crusade. I think we must teach the faith by the way we live, our songs, our games, our cooking, the things we teach, and also teach children the origins of place names and nursery rhymes and pub signs. And in England, of course, the history is all around us, so it's all of that. And the cooking is just part of that, really.
You know, one of the things that I thought, because I grew up in a home where we had a lot of Polish traditions, and, you know, we would do certain, there was sometimes, for instance, on Christmas Eve, there was a soup that my grandmother made that day. Never again during the year would we have that soup, but every Christmas Eve we had that soup. And it was one of my favorites, but we only had it that day. It was a sour potato borscht. And there'd be other things that we did. Like taking wafers that are like the same kind of bread that you have at Mass. And we just put honey on it and make a sandwich, and you break it off and wish each other a blessing.
Yes, that's lovely.
Things like that we did. I've often thought that those traditions and the use of food at Easter and other times was one of the ways that moms would catechize their children. That this is a way to teach them the faith by doing the things that moms have to do anyway.
Yes.
In a traditional home where the mother is a homemaker, the moms are doing all this work, but there's a way to allow this to become a way of teaching the faith as well. And so it's not just, getting calories shoved down some kid's throat.
Indeed.
It's a teaching moment, and you can say, well, this is why we do this.
I'm convinced of this. And that's why, even though, as I said, it isn't so much that I'm excited about cookery as such, although I do enjoy it very much, it's more that it's a teaching thing, and it's to do with the whole of culture. Yes, my childhood memories too would include special things for special days and Sunday lunch. As it happens, I'm not particularly fond of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, which is what we had virtually every Sunday when I was a child. But that specialness of Sunday lunch, that there was a proper set menu, that it was different, tangibly different from other days, that taught me about Sunday. And then Sunday afternoon tea, we would usually go to my grandparents, and this was rather more formal than we would have at home. This taught me about the Lord's Day, to be honest. And I can remember Good Friday had an absolutely different feeling from any other day in the year. You were going to eat different food. Mummy was going to be fasting. And there was no question of eating sweets or watching television in the ordinary way or something. Lent, with its giving up sweeties, and Easter with its glory of chocolate. All of this is very important, and it was taught. Yes, your mother in particular would explain what you meant,
Exactly.
And with it came really fascinating things. I remember my mother would tell us each about our patron saints, and we didn't do what does happen in mainland Europe, where you celebrate the name day and so on. We didn't do that, but nevertheless, on the feast of St. Joan of Arc, she'd remind me, and happy feast day, and tell me all about St. Joan. That's how you do it, in the kitchen, just giving your daughter a hug and saying, happy feast day, That's how you learn about Joan of Arc, and then you supplement that. I do also think that Catholic schools can do this, and it's such a nice way of doing it. In the Catholic schools, you've got the calendar is a gift. You don't have to say arbitrarily, we ought to do a saint. You celebrate that morning, whatever saint's day it is, and it's mentioned at morning assembly, you invoke the saint in name, and then you can do nice things. In my school, we used to wear green hair ribbons on St. Patrick's Day, and all of this sort of thing. And the whole of May, flowers in front of the statue of Our Lady, whose turn is it to do the flowers today, this sort of thing. All of this should be almost like breathing. And then by the time you're a teenager, you know a lot of saints, you know a lot of customs and traditions, and you've actually picked up masses and masses of history too without realizing it. People expect Catholics to have this knowledge. They know that we've got the key to the plot, and it's so silly not to do it. And you don't need to make very heavy weather of it. You do it with the soup on Christmas Eve, that you just sort of suck it up. And I think it's lovely to do it this way. It's also fun, and it's endlessly interesting. I could do umpteen TV series. I mean, I'm only just beginning, really.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll have more. We have another caller, Carol. Hello, Carol.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
Michigan.
Great. And what is your question?
Yes, I'm hoping Mrs. Bogle might be able to recommend some fancy recipes or traditions connected with the big English saints. Like today, for instance, I have St. Benedict Biscop, and he's some kind of abbot from Northumberland from the 700s.
Well, I know about Benedict Biscop, but I'm afraid I can't do a particular recipe for every single saint. When the present Holy Father took the name Benedict, which is, of course, the great St. Benedict, they asked me, I was asked on a radio program, and I immediately thought of Eggs Benedict, it's a nice thing. So I suggested that. Not every saint has an absolute recipe connected with him. Comparatively few do. Some of them have something which isn't necessarily cooking, but it might be something else that you do, or a custom connected with a saint. or even a dance or a poem or something, I'm sorry, I can't help with Benedict biscuit. The best I could come up with would be eggs Benedict. But you might think of something monastic. There might be some monastery food, some monastery bread.
Or monastery beer.
I was going to say, or homebrewed beer.
Sometimes those monasteries are into making liqueurs or beers.
And in fact, one could go further. Most of our best liqueurs, I mean, think of Chartreuse, which comes from, obviously, the Charterhouse monks and so on, Benedictine liqueur. And in fact, loads of our most delicious foods, Wensleydale cheeses, were made by the monks in Wensleydale.
Great cheeses.
And all of French cheeses, I mean, so many of them are monastic. And then one doesn't even need to say, think about things like, Champagne, Dom Pérignon. Dom Pérignon, he was a Benedictine. Maybe I would go for something monastic, go for some nice monastic food, cheese, beer, wine, champagne. There we are. You've solved it. We've solved it.
We have another caller, Bernadine, on the line. Hello, Bernadine.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
Ohio.
Great. And what's your question?
First, I have to say I love you, Father Mitch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For
I appreciate
all your work. And I'd
pleasure.
like to ask Mrs. Bogle, whom I love dearly also,
Thank you.
if she would ever consider writing a book about English women saints.
Well, I've already done that. I didn't write it, but I've edited a book called English Catholic Heroines. And this, in fact, came out last year. It's not written by me. I put it together, and I invited a number of distinguished Catholic writers to choose an English Catholic heroine and write about them. And yes, it is indeed important. There are a number of groups of women in England. First, the Anglo-Saxon saints, people like Ethelreda of Ely and Hilda of Whitby. And then you can go through to the saints of the Reformation, the heroines like Anne Lyne and Margaret Clitheroe, martyred for their Catholic faith. And then there are the women of the Catholic Revival. The one I'm interested in is Caroline Chisholm, who was the pioneer in Australia, helped the settlers there as a great English woman. And two or three of the women who went out with the great Florence Nightingale as nurses in the Crimea, who went on to become foundresses of religious orders, and the religious orders they founded played a huge role in English life in the 19th and early 20th century. And then right up to more modern times, where you have Catholic women writers. The writer of our most popular school stories, the stories of the Chalet School, was in fact a Catholic. So, yeah, I think there's a contribution.
What's the name of this
English
book?
Woman. My book is called English Catholic Heroines, edited by Joanna Bogle, published by Gracewing Books. English Catholic Heroines. And I can say it's a good read because I did not write it. I only wrote a couple of the chapters, and it has a number of very good writers who I asked to contribute, men and women. And I have to say it myself, it's honestly a jolly good read.
Oh, good.
English Catholic Heroines. So there you are, it's all there. And you can really get stuck into it.
Does EWTN Religious Catalog carry it yet?
I'm pretty sure it does. It certainly got widely reviewed. I think it does. And if it doesn't, it will.
All right. Good. Yes, they do. So you can go to EWTN Religious Catalog and get the book English Catholic Heroines.
English Catholic Heroines.
Yes, okay, great. Great. Oh, I'm glad. All right, let's go to another caller. We have Fred on the line. Hello, Fred.
Yes, hi. I want to thank EWTN because you guys got me converted to full Catholic.
Well,
but
welcome.
Now, I'd like to say two things. Number one, as far as baking those cookies, if you put the chocolate chips in an arrangement to where that when you bake the cookies, they look like little crucifixes, that would be nice, because then you would have little crucifixes that a child could meditate on the crucifix and then eat the crucifix. Now, as for my question, you mentioned about the priests, if they were to come over from Anglican to, that they could be ordained even if they're married. But one thing you did not make clear, you said that they could have their own bishop. What I would like you to make clear to our audience is that the bishop must be ordained as well.
Oh, good heavens, yes, of course. It goes without saying.
And also the bishop would have to be celibate.
Yes, you can't have a married bishop.
Yeah,
Yes, I should have explained that. I didn't go into great detail, but that is absolutely the case. Of course, and please understand that at the moment an Anglican is not a validly ordained Catholic priest, and this situation has to be rectified. And it's a step-by-step process. And each man will have to make an individual decision about that and do it. You can't just wave a magic wand about this. There has to be a recognition of this. That is absolutely the case. I'm very glad you were saying about EWTN, because I must say something I wanted to say is that EWTN is beginning to flourish in Britain. And I would like to think one day we'll get phone calls like this from British people. And we now have our own little group. Well, it's not even little. We have St Clair Media in Britain and St Bridget Media in Ireland. And these are our own versions of EWTN. We make our own EWTN programs. People can donate. And if you contact St Clair Media in Britain, if you are a British viewer at the moment, please do, because that way we can post to you, get onto our mailing list, and we'll post you the schedule of programs, because obviously it's different in Britain with British time, and find out what we're doing.
After all, it's a schedule there. Here's only a schedule.
Well, that's right. Well, we, of course, speaking the language properly will be... and we've increasingly made programs in Britain, and we've got a team going, and it's fun. And most parishes are now beginning to put up posters saying, watch your Catholic TV network. And again, of course, the coverage of the papal visit was very useful from our perspective. You could watch it on the BBC, but you got rather better coverage in that sense on EWTN. So St Clair Media is really beginning to hum in Britain, and I would love it if people who are watching now from Britain, please get in touch with St Clair Media. You can get all the details from the EWTN website, or it'll be broadcast on EWTN, and get in touch with us, because that way we can really develop the work, and it is beginning to develop. St Clair is, of course, the patron saint of television. That's why her name was chosen, and it's St Bridget Media in Ireland.
As a matter of fact, I can give you the address. It's St. Clair Media, parentheses, EWTN Limited. And it's Post Office Box 913, Enfield, EN2, OWY. So it's Enfield, EN2, OWY. And the email is, the website is www.ewtn.co.uk. So www.ewtn.co.uk. And you can send email to them by writing to info@ewtn.co.uk. Okay? So that's some of the background. And there's also a phone or a fax. The phone is 020-835-02542. So that number in England is 020-835-02542. And that'll get you right over to St. Clair Media. And St. Bridget Media, just for those who are in the Republic of Ireland, it's St. Bridget Media Limited, and that's at www.ewtn-ireland.ie. So it's ewtn-ireland.ie. And they also have an international phone number. It's 353-61-394-400. So it's 353-61-394-400. So they can get in contact if you're over there in Great Britain or in Ireland. All right, another phone call here. John, hello?
Oh, he's gone. Oh, dear.
No. John, are you there?
Yes.
There you are. Oh, good. Where are you calling from?
New Jersey.
Great. And what's your question?
Well, first of all, many people have already mentioned about the cooking feast and seasons, or seasons and feast, whatever, and I too watched that. But I wanted to say very much how much I've enjoyed the program on the Crusade.
Thank you.
And the information that is presented in that with Mrs. Bogle. The question I have mentioned is often made about the traditions in the Anglican Church, which they would be able to retain. Could you give a few specific ones other than the hymnal that they would be able to retain?
Yes. The answer to that is that it all sounds very picky, but there will be some examples. One would be the tradition of evensong. I know that you could say we can say the office in Britain in the Catholic Church, but we don't, do we? We go to Mass in the morning and that's it. There is a tradition of evensong, which is essentially Compline and Vespers combined. it's not hugely well attended, but it's a beautiful idea. That's something that has been part of the Anglican tradition, so we could have evensong. I mentioned Harvest Festival. Then there are various local traditions. There are some places in Britain where, for example, traditions such as, and I'm choosing a random example here, blessing of the fields or blessing of the harbour for where the fishing fleet go out, or dressing wells, old wells, and putting flowers there, would obviously be done by the local Anglican, not the Catholic Church. You know, these would be an ancient tradition going back to medieval times. Now, some of these traditions could well be brought over within the Anglican Ordinariate, because they would be something that the local Anglican Church would automatically do. And this would also perhaps include presiding at some local event. For example, if there is a Remembrance Day, it's the local, obviously, Anglican vicar who would, as it were, preside at Remembrance Day when we commemorate our war dead. So these are things where the Anglican Church, with a sort of natural sense of being the local church, tends to take charge. And I think that tradition of being part of the local community and looking at local traditions as being, you know, Anglican traditions, well, these would become something that the Ordinariate could say, well, we will do this, you know, and that would happen. There would also be, for example, the concept of the patronal festival of their local church. Well, again, we would do that. If you're in the parish of St. Joseph, you should do something on St. Joseph's Day. But actually, in a rather sad way, we don't tend to do that quite enough in Britain. We think of our Sunday Mass obligations and so on. But many Anglican churches, I know, their local patronal festival has become something which is seen locally as quite important. They might have a flower festival, decorate the church with flowers. Now, I'm not exaggerating these, and I'm not necessarily saying that the Anglicans that come over will all do these, but these are the kinds of cultural things that Catholics could do, but on the whole at the moment, in England at any rate, don't do. So I think these are some things that would come over.
And then they will have a very specific way of celebrating Mass.
Oh, there's no question about that. This will be the main thing. They will bring their, if you like, Anglican rite. Now, in many ways, it won't be so very different from the Mass in English that we have. But there will be a graciousness of language there, and they will have their particular Anglican way of doing it. That is the biggest single thing. And some of the language will be very beautiful and majestic. The hymns will be beautiful, and there is certainly a graciousness and beauty of style. Now, we could have all of these things, but we need reminding of them. And I have been to Anglican churches where there is a dignity and beauty that we could have, but at the moment often don't. So that will come, I think. I don't know if that's quite the sort of thing you mean, but these are some examples. And these are things that would be happening in the church. These would be liturgy, these would be customs that would be in the church, and to some extent outside. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
I think so. He's gone. Now, a couple other questions. Are there whole parishes that have come over?
Yes, there are, but the position is, in January 2011, it's not absolutely clear. What is going to happen is if a whole parish wants to come over, each individual person in that parish will nevertheless have to make a decision.
Right.
And one parish that I was talking about, I'm not going to give its name, it's not very fair because it's not, my parish, but the wife of the vicar was saying, well, there are about 150 people in the parish, which is not very large by Catholic standards, but it's a reasonable parish by Anglican standards. She said about 70 to 80 people will definitely want to come. And the others, well, no, they don't go every Sunday and they're not so committed. But between 70 and 80 people would probably want to come, which would be the majority of the really committed people in the parish. But it is a difficulty because at the moment it's by no means clear they'll be allowed to bring their church. So the absurd thing is that the less committed people, also in the minority, will end up with a building. And the ones who come into the Catholic Church will be given, probably, the use of the local Catholic Church, probably at a slightly inconvenient time. You can have your Mass at 3 p.m. Now, this is much less than satisfactory. But this may be a temporary arrangement. Sometimes you have to step out in faith until you can go to the next stage. And the Anglican Church at the moment is not comfortable with the idea of them continuing to use Catholic churches. The Catholic Church will, of course, say you can use our church, but as I said, that's got a borrowed feel to it. But there are other possibilities. Catholics also have churches that are underused that could be handed over, depends on the geography of the thing. There are Catholic schools or other ancillary buildings which could be handed over to the ordinariate if that were appropriate. You could have a Catholic school which on Sundays could be used by the ordinariate, and they might indeed create a beautiful chapel there, which in that sense would also be a gift to the Catholic school. There may be some other building which could be used, which is less than ideal, but which could be turned even temporarily into a place of beauty.
So this is going to be a work in process.
It's a work in progress. And I have to say that the Anglicans themselves are joking and laughing and saying, what are we bringing? We're coming with empty hands. Well, as I've indicated, I don't think their hands are empty.
That won't be the case.
But they are joking, and some of us were saying, well, you can bring over the Anglican tradition of Anglican tea parties and nice floral arrangements, and we were teasing them, you know.
I'm afraid that we've run out of time. It's gone very quickly, but thank you very much for being with us, and I hope that your new show goes well.
Thank you.
And I'm excited about it. And may Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine upon you. May He lead you in all of your ways by His peace. And I bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And remember, we can bring programs to you like this one and feasts and seasons and all the other programs because this network is brought to you by you. You are the ones who support this network. So we ask you to please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill, and we'll be able to pay all of our bills too. God bless you and thank you.